My mission here is to make wholesale easy.
Mhm.
And that's the opportunity, is to really reinvent the industry and fundamentally shift the way people operate. And in many cases, that answer boils down to give me customer service. Yes, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, because this is all data that exists.
A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible: Lot Links, Car Dealership Guy News, and OPENLANE. And now let's get into the show. Shiv Dutt on the CDG podcast. Shiv, welcome.
Thank you for having me, OC. Happy to be here.
Good to have you on. You guys have OPENLANE. You've been through some crazy changes here in the last couple of years, so I'm excited to dig into a little bit of your story and what you're up to.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. Been listening to your podcast, super exciting, and following you closely on LinkedIn as well. I can't, I'm gonna not gonna lie if I tell you, not gonna lie if I tell you you're my first source of the truth and what's going on in the industry, especially for somebody who's new to the industry. So I
I love it.
appreciate the work you're doing for me personally.
All right. Well, I like you already then. All right. Well, I mean, it's a good start, right? So tell me a little bit about, as a startup guy myself, formerly, I looked through your background, saw you've had, a bunch of different experiences that brought you up to this point in your career. Give us a little bit of, background on yourself. What brought you to automotive?
I was thinking about this myself, and I probably would have answered this question differently a year or so back. But one thing since I've joined OpenLane that I've heard consistently from everyone, I've been out in the field talking to like dealers, almost every week, and the one thing that keeps getting mentioned is that this is a relationship business, right? And so, in some respects, I would start there to say what brought me to OpenLane is relationships. I knew some of the people who are in the leadership roles. I actually worked with them in prior experiences, and they kind of knew me very well, knew of some of the work I had done in the past. I've spent a lot of time in innovation and transformation role. I am driven by customer problem solving, and I worked on kind of in roles where you have to think outside of the box, think horizontally and vertically. And so they kind of reached out to me in this particular role, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to bring some outside thinking to challenge the status quo," and that was exciting. I will say I have in the past dabbled in automotive. You said you're a startup guy. I worked in a startup. Sadly, I failed. I didn't succeed, but I spent 2 years trying to do a startup in the automotive space, specifically in commuter ride sharing, actually, of all things, back in 2015. Now I'm aging myself. I loved it. I love that time. I love the industry. I love the people. I love the opportunity. There's just so much. It's ripe for a change, ripe for disruption, ripe for opportunity. And so when you factor in the relationships, you factor in the industry, and it's about people. I just love the people I met at OpenLane, and so I was like, hey, I want to get in back into the space.
I noticed that about I noticed that about your experience, how you have been in these like transformation roles, which, is a fully loaded term. But here's my question for you, right? So you get into automotive, right? You get into automotive retail. What was the most antiquated thing that you noticed or saw? And I ask you that as an outsider, quote unquote, right? You came into the industry, right? Us or anyone that's in the business that's been in here for a decade, 2 decades, whatever, like we see it every day, right? There's certain things sometimes I'm like, wow, someone mentions to me, I'm like, wait, I didn't even know that. I didn't even realize. You're right. This could be done so much better. So, what was or what still is potentially like one of the most antiquated parts of the business in your mind?
Okay, this is going to be an interesting one. The one thing that comes to my mind, number one, and first and foremost, is really mindset. And it's going to be an odd one to say. Um, I talked about I talked about the industry, and I talked about how everybody's told me it's a relationship business, which, by the way, I believe. And I fundamentally, whether it's this industry or any other industry, I do believe relationships are critical, and it is critical to our long-term success. And you can talk about AI and technology all you want, but relationships are always going to be important, and a key driver of customer problem solving. What I mean by mindset is one of the things that I've been challenged with often is people have told me, well, it's different in the automotive industry. That's not exactly how we work, right? In this industry, that doesn't really apply. And and the more I've thought about it and the more I talk about it, the problems sound eerily similar to many of the problems I worked in pretty much any other industry. And I've spanned appliances, services, beauty, startups. I've done a lot of things. And ultimately, when you start getting down to the core customer problems, like truly listening and hearing your customers, interestingly enough, the problems sound eerily similar. So probably the biggest paradigm shift that I feel is one of a almost like a mindset and a cultural shift to ask yourselves whenever you're dealing with a problem in this industry is to say, not get bogged down by how it's been done, but ask yourself, take your own experiences and ask yourself, what do I love? What do I expect in the world today, and why not? So it's the just imagine philosophy, and you as a startup probably understand that. That's the thing. That's the mindset shift. Is the one that I am trying to get across more than anyone. If I had to pinpoint one, if that makes any sense.
No, I think I you actually surprised me with your response because I thought you were going to go to like a hard example, meaning like, you know, the way this is being purchased or that is being sold. And you went to a very quote unquote like soft example on the more like emotional intelligence side. And so you surprised me in a good way, which I think that's a good point you make, right? Like when we're doing certain things in certain ways, it's easy to get caught up in like, hey, this is how it's being done, or this is how it's being done in automotive. But yeah, I mean, I think having that ability to kind of think a layer deeper and really pressure test how we're whether it's the way we buy and sell cars wholesale or the way finance cars, whatever it may be, I think you're coming at it from a good angle. So let's fast forward a little bit there, right? Where are we at today with wholesale? Where are we going?
If you think about wholesaling, right? Ultimately, like I said, you're in the business of retailing. There's the data exists. All the data exists. What you're retailing, how much you're selling, what's the opportunity, how much could you sell it for, what the marketplace is bearing, all that data exists. So the opportunity to optimize to say when should I want to actually need to wholesale a car. And let's be clear, when you say need to wholesale a car, it's saying finding the right buyer at the right place, right? And making sure I'm optimizing my time. All that data exists. The ability to actually preempt that and to be able to tell somebody and say, hey, you know what? It looks like you have XYZ in your inventory. You need to get rid of it. And then finding the right buyer and connecting you and doing that fast. Speed is critical. It's not that it's not happening today. The process is long. It can be as long as I've heard talking to dealers. I was actually with a dealer on the West Coast this week, and they were saying it can be 20 to 30 days long. So going from the 20 to 30 days down to like 1 to 2 days, that's the opportunity, and time is money. So as I think about the future of wholesale, that's where we're going to have to get to. We're going to have to get to a place where we're saving people incredible amounts of time and increasing their productivity.
Mhm. I want to ask you a bit more about the actual, just the tactical wholesaling experience and what you've experienced and the dealers you're working with. But tell me, just to table set real quick, just give us like a 30-second overview of your business model today for anyone that's either not familiar with what OpenLane does or has never purchased a car through OpenLane. Just to give us like a little overview of what OpenLane does today, all the different types of divisions you have.
So, like I said, OpenLane's been around for over 25 years. In fact, we used to actually be in the physical auction business ourselves, but we have now committed to fully digital. So, what do we do? We enable, to talk about making wholesale easy. And so we manage the entire wholesale journey all the way from and by the way, we have different parts of our businesses that manages different pieces. So all the way from identifying, helping a retailer identifying cars that they want to wholesale, to helping them then actually inspect those cars, making sure you have really high quality inspection condition reports, right? That's critical to build trust. We do that. Then we take those cars and we place them on our online digital marketplace. We connect buyers and sellers together, right? So we enable them to find each other. We enable them to shop their way. So this is a really important point. We don't have a one size shoe fits all wholesaling solution. We run timed auctions, right? Similar to what a physical auction is, like a 2 hour auction. We run those on specific days. So if you're looking for a specific day, we do that. We have a marketplace solution, which means cars are there 24/7. I can shop whenever. 12 o'clock in the night, I want to engage and buy a car. We can enable that. And we have something called absolute sale, which is essentially almost like a guaranteed auction format, which runs daily, and it runs from 9 Eastern to 4 Eastern. And essentially, it allows it's sellers saying, hey, I'm committed to selling the car. So buyers don't waste their time and they can engage and buy cars. So we enable these different formats of solutions for people to buy cars. We also, from wholesale engineering, after you've chosen to buy the car, right? We also enable both logistics as well, so we can actually manage the transportation of the car. We also enable manage arbitration, right? So if you have a problem with a car, we manage that from our side. And as part of the arbitration, we also do we have something called buyback guarantee. And in certain cars, in certain situations, we'll take the car back, no questions asked. It's like a free return, if you will. So if it doesn't work for you, we manage that piece as well. So we manage that entire cycle of wholesale, the entire life cycle. And one other point I would make out is we have both dealer cars as well as off lease cars. We also have repo business, so we have repo cars as well. So we have every kind of inventory available to purchase on OpenLane.com.
So tell me, why go all digital? Like, what's your thesis there on just the future and I guess present of wholesale?
I would simply put it down to focus, right? Like I think a very important thing is, and I learned this a long time ago, Yossi, in other businesses I've done as well, is one of the hardest jobs in a company is prioritization, right? And the more you diversify and do different things, the less you are good at one thing. I would say that we see the value in digital. We understand that it is a very efficient way of solving dealer problems. If we bifurcated our focus, you'll see. I think we would be split, and we used to do that. We used to decide on how we want to manage different things. We want to double down on our core competency. We see ourselves as a technology company, a data company, right? So we'd say we're a data and technology company first that enables a solution that for dealers to make their lives easier.
This episode is brought to you by Lot Links. Dealers, when you look onto your lot, do you see risk? Every day, almost half of a dealer's inventory is at risk of aging. That's an average of a $1,500 hit on your gross profit per vehicle. But savvy dealers can avoid risk and get that money back. Introducing LotLinks Sentinel, the first and only AI inventory management solution completely focused on predicting and mitigating your carryover risk. With a decade of machine learning optimization behind it, LotLinks Sentinel allows dealers to launch separate strategies for each individual VIN and ensure they sell faster and more profitably. All this so you can turn cars 7 to 10 days sooner and protect your margins. Stop accepting unnecessary risk and start controlling your inventory. Get the LotLinks effect with LotLinks Sentinel. Visit lotlinks.com/sentinel to learn more or click the link in the show notes below. So tell me a little bit about the trends, right? What are you seeing as the trends in the wholesale marketplace economy right now? Like shifting, and we're talking tech, behavior, transport. Where are we at right now? What's changing?
It's fascinating because it's rapidly changing. Um, to begin with, I would just start off by saying Yossi is like easy is everything, right? We need everything. It comes to me as like every conversation I have is about the easy button. I'm talking to dealers. I was with a dealer a couple of weeks ago, and that was actually the words they used. Is they're like, we need the easy button. I don't want to spend time thinking about this problem. I just want it taken care of. And in many cases, that answer boils down to give me customer service. Give me somebody just to talk to, and just they take care of the problem for me. Our job from a technology perspective is to say, how can you do that in a more efficient way? Take away the administrative tasks for me so that I can focus on customer relationship management, right? That's kind of the biggest core trend. As I think about that from a life cycle, Yossi, here's how I think about it. I kind of break it down into the subcomponents. I would say number one, I would say is inspections, right? Condition report. It all starts in from a trend perspective. It starts there. Is do I what is the car actually what is the car actually worth? What condition is it? And that's the big unknown, right? Like that's the piece that you
It's
have
it's
to spend a
also
lot of time.
something that dealers complain a lot about because it's extremely subjective and it's really tough to operationalize and scale. I mean, I get people talking to me about condition reports all the time. Yeah.
It is probably the thing that, as I've gotten into this industry, is probably the space that has a lot of time is spent on. And I like what you just said, Yossi, about subjective. It is. That's what I keep hearing. And ultimately, you can build the perfect mousetrap, but ultimately it's being executed by a person. And if that person is not fully trained or doesn't do a good job, it doesn't matter what you do, right? So I mean, that is a huge space. I would say the trends I'm seeing continuing, as I've talked about technology trends in other places. For example, artificial intelligence. This is where I think I see a huge trend and a focus here is how do you take that subjectivity out? Because at the end of the day, the condition of a car is somewhat binary. Like, it's not a question. Like, the reality is you should be able to. It's pretty binary. You can say like zeros and ones. You can the body condition, the mechanical condition. You should be able to get it. If you had the right data, you can translate that. It's about getting that right data and then translating that data. So I would say that the first big trend I would say is using more data, collecting data. I see a future of saying, how do we get more data? And some of this, by the way, data actually even exists through different devices that exist. There's more and more data existing about a car right now. So using that data to essentially get to a place where you can get the right inspection for the right car with full transparency is probably the first area. And I think that's one of the areas you'll see we are also investing in. In fact, we just launched something called Visual Boost AI, which was really what it is it looks at a car and it does we take pictures of it, the regular picture you take of a car, and it actually looks at those pictures and draws polygons around damages. So it actually it finds all the damages that are on the car, and then we actually have it checked by the inspector. So that's like a first foray. So I think that's going to be a huge space.
Before you go on to the second thing, right? Just to build on top of that. So, what is that going to mean for our industry? Like I said, dealers have historically complained a ton about condition reports. I've dealt with this myself firsthand. Do you see a world here that we're approaching where condition reports will be accurate to the point where, as dealers, really ultimately the result is you have more confidence in your purchase. You're likely willing to pay more money because you know what you're getting. You're taking less risk, right? It's everything's done more, faster, right? Like, is that going to be reality? How far are we away from that?
The answer to that is yes, 100% yes. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, because this is all data that exists. It's just about finding the most efficient way of collecting the data. And as we are already proving with this Visual Boost AI, it drives a better outcome. Let me give you a stat, right? We launched Visual Boost AI, and since the time we've launched it, it's early days still. It's only been out there for about 6 months. In the time we've launched it, there was a concern. By the way, when we launched it, there were some sellers who were like concerned about it. They're saying, you know what, it's going to not sell my cars. It's not gonna people are gonna get scared, and as a result because they're gonna see more damages. And you know what we found, and we wanted to test it. We are a test and learn culture, so we tested it, we piloted it, and then we've launched it now. And the consistent data we found is buyers using the Visual Boost AI feature, they tend to be, we almost see a 3x increase in view to bid ratio. Meaning to say, I look at it and it increases my confidence for all the reasons, because now I know what I'm seeing, and that actually increases the ability and the willingness for me to actually place a bid.
Okay, so just to recap that. So you're talking about dealers using your app who are making purchases. They're using this one piece of software on your app, and that's translating to 3x higher view to bid ratio.
Correct. Correct. Because it increases their confidence, right? It increases their willingness to believe. So actually what we're finding is it's a positive benefit. So this goes to your point of, firstly, when you ask the question of how will it transform the industry, the first question is, does it solve a problem, and does it create value for me as a seller, and does it create value for me as a buyer, right? Those you're the two sides of the marketplace. The simple answer that we're saying, it creates value as a buyer, right? Because I get more confidence. It creates value as a seller because I'm actually getting more activity on those cars. So you're creating, the flywheel starts operating better. So I think it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And we just have to prioritize and continue building out more data around these condition reports.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you about what are the best dealers doing on your platform. Like, I'm curious how they're transacting. But before we get to that, I want you to finish your thought on the trends, right? So you mentioned the first trend here is leveraging AI for inspections, right? Making them more seamless. Any other trends? Any other major shifts happening? Behavior?
I think the second shift is this marketplace shift of what was shift of when I'm actually doing wholesale, it's shop my way or shop your way. I would like to say, right? And this is a very simple idea. One of the interesting things we've found, and we've had different formats, and you've obviously done different acquisitions and worked. One of the interesting things is there's not a one. I'm going to be a little geek out on you and use my Lord Ring analogy of one ring to rule them all, right? There isn't a one ring to rule them all solution when it comes to marketplaces, right? It's really what we found from our data is different consumers like shopping in different ways. If you talk to some of our dealers who participate in our auction format, our 2 hour auction formats, right? They'll tell you like it's the best thing ever. They're like, I can't believe I know that it's on a certain day. I know it's for a certain time. I know the outcome. I prepare for it. I manage it, and that's the way I want to shop. That's the way I want to sell. Or a buyer is saying that's the way I want to buy, right? And then there are others who are saying that's crazy. That's like a time glut. I can't manage my time like that. Like, you know what? If I have I'll do what I need to do, and maybe at 8 o'clock in the evening on a Friday because that's when I have the time to do it. And you have to meet that need. So a big trend out here is, I think, and this is one of the things that really another reason why digital is so important, Yossi, is why, because it enables you to quickly iterate and develop experiences based on customer needs. So I think that we're not. I don't think there is one size fits solution. I think we're gonna want to see that explode.
When I was, putting up our first reconditioning center, right? Because we were a used car operation, so we were all about streamlining that. I mean, it took a long time, probably like a year and a half, 2 years. Zoning, all these things. But then now, I mean, what I'm doing today, it's crazy, right? Like we come up with an idea, it's shipped within 24 hours. So it's super permissionless, which is pretty nice when it comes to your point, like iterating on customer feedback. So, anyways, that's a sidebar though. You're about to mention a third trend.
I would say the third thing that I've seen, and this one is really as I've learned the industry, it's become very apparent, especially with franchise dealer groups. Right? You have a corporate entity, and then you have individual rooftops. And one of the things that has been interesting is this dichotomy or this battle between centralized decision making and the benefits of and the efficiencies that bring out, and decentralization, giving the rooftops the autonomy to make their decisions because they understand market conditions best, right? And I do think a big trend I'm seeing is trying to bridge that gap. Like, does it really need to be an or decision, or can it be an and decision? So, how do you build solutions that enable a certain amount of command and control? Right, where from a corporate perspective, you have view and you can advise and you can assist and you can direct, but at the same time enable individual stores to also have the autonomy and to exercise their judgment because they know the customers the best. They're closest to the customer. So I think there is a huge trend around figuring that piece out that I think we're on the cusp of. So that enterprise innovation space is another big area and trend. I think that's very interesting.
Tell me a little bit about given the position you're in, and having access to all this data and transactions. What are you seeing right now from an economic perspective? Like, just talk to me a little bit about pricing trends in the market. Where are we at in the cycle? Right, give us some kind of insight behind the scenes. What's happening?
It's super interesting. Again, as fairly new to the industry, it's like, wow, where do I begin? It's like, so let me talk about the two things. Like I said, OpenLane, one of the things about OpenLane is we have, we do 1.3 million cars. We sell 1.3 million cars, and it's about a 50-50 split between commercial and dealer cars. Like, little known fact, we manage over 70% of the off lease portfolio that exists in the industry, which gives us incredible insights into actually what's not just what's going on right now, but what's likely to happen. Because we actually know those cars that are maturing and what's likely going to happen, right? So we have the dealer information and we have the commercial information. And one of the things on the off lease side of it, Yossi, that's really interesting is you get to they come on the digital assets first. So it's actually exclusive on our sites first before it actually flows down into any other any other auction, right? So we get that access to the data first. So let's talk about it from both those lenses. Here's what I would say is what we're seeing. What's interesting though, and this is looking at our own data, the gap between seller expectations, right? What the seller expects from a pricing perspective. And we know that because we know what the seller sets as their reserve and how far they go down versus what the buyers are willing to pay, which really boils down to what buyers are bidding and then what do they end up buying. That gap is actually increasing. So pricing is coming down, but I would say so buyers are expecting to pay less and less. Sellers are still holding on to inventory. So from a macro trend, some of this, of course, there's been supply constraints, and there still are in certain cases. But I think that's going to continue to change.
What's driving that? Like, is that being driven by more new car supply that's driving down prices, or I mean, something that's been on my mind a lot, right? Is like, have the CDK outages impacted this as well, and to what extent? Like, what's your hypothesis here?
I definitely a lot of different macroeconomic. It's you talk about noise right now, Yossi. Like trying to unpack what the drivers are is really really hard because it feels a little bit like a perfect storm. You've got interest rates are high. You've got new car. You're right. New car supply is increasing in certain cases, and the amount of promotions in those cars are also increasing. Right. So we're seeing that activity starting to return. So that's definitely a factor. There's probably a lot of people who made purchases over the last few months expecting certain things and bought at a high level, and now they're hoping that they're underwater and they're hoping to sell those cars at a higher price. So there's hope is I would say it's certainly one of the hypotheses is that people are hoping that things come back because it has been so tumultuous. We've seen these spikes and changes over time. I think you asked about CDK. Let me just start off by saying certainly we're not experts on the whole CDK side. What we have heard though consistently from dealers is that 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 the issue they see it as a blip, and eventually that volume is going to come back. So it's not gone. It's not like that has disappeared.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been like months, right? It's going to cap up at about a little bit over 2 weeks. So that's I think it's not. I'm no economist here, but just if you look at auction trends, it doesn't seem like it's enough to be really disruptive to the wholesale market. And I think it's worth mentioning that it's obviously as good of news as could possibly be that CDK was able to get their hands wrapped around this relatively quickly, and that I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dealership employees and millions of total employees, right, between adjacent companies that were impacted. So massive disruption that really no one could have predicted. So pretty crazy, but it's good to hear you say that that values haven't been disrupted so severely just yet, because that's a promising sign, right? At least it signals some stability. So that's obviously a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The other piece I just wanted to kind of add in, so I know you talked about pricing, and I know I'm kind of going around a little bit, is the other piece of data we have is the off lease data, right? Which is kind of interesting for us. So we actually try to track what is called obviously the equity gap, which is the difference between residual values and market values, right? And that's a real lead indicator. This is a kind of interesting chart. It's a fun one to watch for me as I've come into this industry. Is like, back in 2019, pre-COVID, typically your market values were either at residual or slightly lower. In fact, through COVID, that fundamentally shifted, right? Where at one point in early 22, there was almost a $20,000 gap where the market values were significantly higher than residual. That's been dropping, right? That has been dropping over time, especially in the last year. I would say in the last 3 months, what's interesting as we watch it, it's stabilized a little bit. So that gap has dropped, but it's stabilized a little bit. It isn't dropping anymore. So it'll be interesting. Now, some of that on the off lease portfolio, of course, we're also getting to a place where COVID impact on lease volumes are also being impacted. So there are a lot of moving pieces on that, but that's likely going to also have an impact on pricing going forward. Is the amount of off lease inventory that's available as well.
This episode is brought to you by my very own Car Dealership Guy News. CDG News is here to help you stay updated on all things automotive. We're not your typical news crew. We're bringing you concise, unbiased car industry news in easy to digest formats. From the hottest headlines to podcast summaries, dealership best practices, and industry insights, we've got it all covered. And guess what? It's all free, no paywalls, just like we always promise. hop over to cdg.news. That's cdg.news and check us out. We're all yours for your feedback. Tell us what you need. Give us your honest thoughts. We're here to deliver real value. So don't wait. Head to cdg.news now or click the link in the show notes below. All right, Shiv, great insights today. So before we close up, I mean, how does OpenLane 10x from here? What's the grandmaster plan?
Man, I like the 10x number. I'm almost afraid to answer this. Peter's going to hold me to it. Well, let's look. I would say we need to. If there's anything we've learned, is you need to be core to your principles, core to your strategy, and double down on it. Right? We are very, very clear. We want to make wholesale easy. Okay, that's our goal. To do that, I would say there are really five tenets that we got to really deliver on. Five. Okay. Number one is enable customers to shop your way, right? We have three formats. We're going to continue to iterate, learn from those formats, learn from customers, and enable them to sell their way, to buy their way, when they want, how they want, in the right way. We just launched Absolute Sale. We're seeing huge benefits. One of the benefits outside of, I told you, I think I mentioned it's almost 40% of our business. One of the important things on that is it's driving almost incremental $500 in value retention for dealers. That's real money, right? So that's why it matters. And for buyers, it's saving them time. And we're going to continue enabling shop your way and enabling formats and improving our formats. Number two, scale, right? An effective marketplace needs all the buyers, all the sellers, all the inventory in one place. That's a model. That's a marketplace model. We're well on our way. I think I mentioned we have 1.3 million cars. We have dealer cars and commercial cars. The commercial cars are largely exclusive to us. You can only buy them on OpenLane. We're going to continue to grow that. We have different businesses. We're unifying all these businesses, and with that, we're unifying our dealers. We have over 50,000 dealers that are shopping and over 200,000 units of inventory that we list on a monthly basis. And that scale is important because that means that my time is well spent. When I come to openlane.com, I know the inventory is there, I know the buyers are there, I know the sellers are there. And that's important. Talk about saving time, making it easy. Everybody needs to be there. Number three, speed. It's critical. Time is money, man. Like one thing I've learned is dealers do not have the time. I watched a dealer the other day and they talked about, hey, in this environment, they were cutting 10% of their staff, and the used car manager was now wearing three hats. They're buying, they're selling, they're helping out with other administrative work. We have to get them to a point where things are faster. OpenLane is dedicated to that, and we track everything. So, for example, even an inspection, like we measure it not just in minutes. We measure in minutes and seconds. So we've got it down to a point where we try to get our inspection is like about 12 minutes. I want to say 58 seconds. I mean, I'm quoting that number. That's how precise we want to be. We want to drop that down. What that means is when we go and inspect within that time frame, that car is available to buy and sell on the marketplace. I mean, to buy on the marketplace, right? You've done the inspection, and so they're on the marketplace. But it's not just that. We got to make the process of buying faster. So today it takes about a day for a car to sell on our marketplace. We want to make it faster. We want to be able to find the right buyer, right seller, and sell it. The time for the car to be picked up from your lot, right? Because your lots are full. You want to be retailing. You don't want the wholesale car. Once you've sold the car, you want it gone, right? And that can range right now from anywhere from like a day to as many as 3 to 4 days, depending on where the location is. We got to bring that down. If I sell the car, it needs to be off my lot. And then as a buyer, I need to be able to get that fast. So that entire wholesale transaction, that time, we need to be on the forefront of saving time. We are already on an average, based on anecdotal evidence and our history, we're about 2 to 5x faster than physical auctions in a whole wholesale time. That's real money. That's depreciation. So we need to continue to invest in speed, which takes me to, I talked about depreciation, lower cost, right? Talked about it. We are committed to digital, which means we're asset light, which means that money we're saving, we're investing in technology and lower fees, right? Number one. Number two, we are going to arbitrations. We have some of the lowest arbitration rates in the industry.
How are you achieving that?
I honestly believe because we are investing in condition reports. We honestly believe that when somebody buys, we try to, transparency is critical. You know what you're buying, you know the seller you're buying from, and that's important because that enables you to build trust, which means when I get what I want, I believe in that. And so I don't need to go and arbitrate. Uh, so it's we are saving, and that's real money, right? That's money that you're saving. And then the other piece around cost is also dealer productivity, right? If you think about it from a dealer perspective, and I was talking to a dealer I was at about a month or so ago, and they mentioned something. They said, you know, I love digital wholesaling because in the old days, I had my guy go to an auction at 11 in the morning and then he's gone for the full day. Like he's pretty much done. Now it's like, hey, I know the auction's there. 2 hours, I'm done. I know what the outcomes are. I get all the data. I get all the reports. I'm done, which means they're doing other things. That's real cost. So people cost is also insane. So we need to continue to reduce costs, right? Higher ARPU. Ultimately, we need to be driving higher retention values and everything our innovation to be able to, if we find the right buyer and the right, I learned a long time ago, there's no such thing as a bad product. There's just a bad price. And if you find the right buyer and the right seller, you can drive higher retention.
And let's just define that. You said ARPU, which I'm just going to guess you're saying average revenue per unit. It's just a guess.
That's average revenue per unit. That's right.
All right. So for anyone wondering, average revenue per unit. I've had a fair share of acronyms through my career, so I can put two and two together by now.
Yeah. That's when you know. That's when you know, Yossi, that I've been in the industry now long enough when I'm starting to throw acronyms out.
You see, this is just like us when I tell you like there's certain things where I'm like, wow, like I didn't even think about that, but I'm like, wait, ARPU, so I like it.
Yeah, and then finally, I would end by saying transparency. I've already mentioned it's transparent. We're going to continue investing in transparency, right? We want to make it. We want to make this as transparent and clean a process as possible. We want buyers to be able to trust the products they're selling, sellers to be able to trust. Trust is everything. And ultimately, if we do these things that I just talked about, again, shop your way, right? Multiple formats, scale, speed, cost and ARPU, lower cost, higher ARPU, and transparency. If we do these 5 things, we start making wholesale easy. And if we make wholesale easy, we enable our dealers to spend less time on administrative tasks and more time on building relationships. If we do that, that creates what I call a product moat, which means that creates a solution. And when you have a product moat, that's when you 10x your business.
Well put, my friend. Shiv Dutt, thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Yossi. This was a pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.